Welcome to Key Moments in the Game. This is the introductory session, the first in a series of 5, presented by Ian Barker, the Director of Coaching Education for the National Soccer Coaches Association of America. Ian is currently the Director of Coaching Education for NSCAA, but has spent 21 seasons working at the college level with the University of Wisconsin and Macalester College. He is also a former U.S. Youth Soccer Director of Coaching for the state of Minnesota Youth Soccer. He did that for 10 years and is a member of the U.S. Youth Soccer and the NSCAA's national coaching staff. He is also a head coach for the Region 2 Boys OPP program and has a number of licenses, including the USSF A license and the NSCAA Premier Diploma. Welcome Ian to the presentation.
Thanks, David, and thank you everybody for joining in live. I regret that the attempt from Düsseldorf was not completely clear, so certainly everybody that joined us on Tuesday of last week, I hope you got something out of that presentation, and then the improved audio here gives you extra value. So thank you for bearing with us Tuesday and again today. I'm very excited to listen to Jason this evening. Obviously working with Anson Dorrance, I'm sure he's got some really powerful insights. Paul Marco, one of our head instructors and a Division 1 head coach, and then of course Coach DeChico, who's won World Cups and Olympics amongst other things. And then the review with Christian should be really entertaining. Christian's very bright, has been a mover and shaker in the US Club Soccer program and UCNL, and I know Christian will really tie in the presentation of Jason, Paul, and Tony. So I'm excited about this this presentation team. I will say that my attack at the issues today will be very general in nature, and the 3 other presenters will get into much more specific detail. But what I'd like to do is give an overlay of some of the issues pertaining to what I consider to be key moments in the game. So let's see if we can advance my slides. We will get going. There we go. Okay. So these are not areas I'm going to spend a lot of time on this afternoon, but here are some of the areas where I think we as coaches can start thinking about key moments in the game. And one of the ways I'd like to approach this presentation is along these lines. In a world where your talent pool is relatively equal to your opponents, the game is going to be at its very closest in terms of the competition. And so at some of these key moments, potentially intangibles or specialty type times that can differentiate in terms of the result between two teams of equal ability. So my argument for you listening today is that if you manage some of these key moments and put that extra attention to detail in, it will raise your team above the bar in an area or a world of equal competition. So in regards to time within the game, one of the key issues is that the beginning of halves and the end of halves are very critical times in terms of goals scored. And the percentages of goals scored in games tend to be very much weighted towards the early part of the half and the latter part of the half. And I think this talks a lot about the need for preparation, and it also talks a lot about the importance of attention to detail physically and mentally as the half progresses or the game progresses. And so I consider the key moments around how the game starts and how the game concludes, or how the half starts and concludes, as time when you as the coach should be putting in some special detail and attention. Certainly in the modern game, and we see this on television all the time, the period of time immediately after a goal is scored is often quite dramatic in terms of the overall context of the game. You often see teams concede 2 quick goals because their response to conceding the first one is disorganized, downhearted, dejected. But equally, you see teams immediately bounce back because the team that scored is disorganized, they're still celebrating, they're not really paying attention. So being prepared to manage the period of time immediately after a goal, to the good or to the bad, I think, is something we might consider a key moment of the game. Certainly substitutions. These are opportunities for you as the coach to influence or impact the game quite directly by the introduction of new blood, new athleticism, perhaps new positions, changing up tactical formations. I think the key with substitutions is to really prep your substitutes before they go into the game. And that would be physically prep them, get them warmed up, but also sit with them for a period of time, make sure they understand what they're getting into, and encourage the substitutes to be watching the game critically from the moment that the game kicks off. Too often, our bench disengages from the game, and so when they step into the game, they're really not prepared to get up to the speed of the game. So if I've got a spare central midfielder on the bench, I'm going to ask him or her to specifically watch what's happening in the center of midfield during the game, what are the matchups, what are the numbers, so on and so forth. Stoppages of play are a wonderful opportunity for teams to exploit to the good or the bad. And when I say bad, that's to say sometimes in a stoppage of play, a free kick, a throw-in, a dead ball, we fall asleep. By the same token, if we're particularly engaged, we get the ball restarted quickly, we put a long throw-in, we take a quick free kick, we run a short corner kick. These are great opportunities to exploit the stoppage in play while the other team is not engaged. And then the final one that we just came up with when we were talking and thinking about it as a group of coach educators was this notion of discipline. And very often, the referee getting involved in the handing out of cards is a key moment in the game, because there's going to be a stoppage of play for sure. There's going to be some sort of reaction from the person getting the card, potentially a reaction from the bench of the team that's receiving the card, possibly a reaction from the bench of the team that suffered the foul that necessitated the yellow or red card. And so these emotional moments, when the players are very active, engaged, when the referee's involved, and perhaps the bench of the other team is very engaged, is a great opportunity for you as the coach to be calm, be consistent, be prepared for that reaction, and of course have your team prepared for how they manage those moments in the game. So those are some examples, I think, when we're talking about key moments in the game. Now, to the three presentations, so a few more specific, preparing before we go into Jason's session, and then Paul and Tony's. And so Jason's going to talk about chasing the game or closing out the game. And of course, this is going to relate most directly to what the score line is and how much time is left on the clock. And so we're a goal down, and there's time's running out. We're going to be chasing the game. We're a goal up, and we need to close out the game. And what does that look like? And certainly closing out the game doesn't necessarily mean we kick the ball as far out of bounds as possible. It might be that we go for a second goal to really kill the game off. So it doesn't have to be a negative closing out the game. But certainly if we're chasing the game, we have to be very positive in our mindset. In terms of chasing the game, we need to think about our style of play. And so if we're a team that prides ourselves on possession, a relatively indirect style of play where we like to keep possession, break the team down, recycle the ball, this might be a bit circumspect if the time is really running down. And so we might need to be prepared to go a route one a little bit more and maybe be more direct. And this would actually tie in with closing out the game. We may be a team that is quite direct in our typical style of play when we're playing an even score line early in the game. But now we're trying to close it out. Maybe we do take a few more touches. We play a little bit more indirect. We try to possess and take time off the clock that way. So knowing our style and having our team prepared to adjust its style, I think, is part of this. Certainly notions of possession. If we're chasing the game, we want to have the ball. But if we're closing out the game, I would argue we want to have the ball. And so if we're playing a style or we're playing in a mindset where there's a lot of turnover of possession, we are ultimately going to be less effective at one of our chosen tasks. And so I would make a strong argument that to close out the game, very often it's better to have the ball than constantly defending set pieces, throw-ins, etc. Managing the clock. This is important at the youth level. If we model off at the pro level, I think we can be a little bit cynical in our approach. So we're time wasting, we're falling over, we're taking a long time on restarts, which is the kind of stuff you see at the professional level. I wouldn't want my players to be like that. And I certainly wouldn't want in the youth level too much dribbling in the corner and standing on the ball. I personally don't encourage that. It actually creates bad blood amongst teams. It creates injuries and potential flare-ups. So when I'm thinking about managing the clock, I'm thinking about making sure that the team knows the degree of urgency required, so they know how much time is left, they know the scoreline, or they know that they are indeed winning and that we might not need to get the ball reintroduced quite so quickly, and maybe we as the coach make a key substitution, which does take a few minutes off the clock, but also introduces a player into an important part of the game, but managing the clock. And then finally, and this is the thrust of this part of my presentation, is the situational play. And so my contention to you as youth coaches is that you can prepare your team in the training environment for some of these key moments, specifically chasing and closing out the game, by the use of what I call situational play, where you create scenarios in the training setting, in the scrimmage part of training, and you say to the team, your team is a man down, and you've got to hold on to a scoreline, or your team is a goal down, your team is a goal down, and you've got to chase the game, and I'm going to give you 8 minutes to get the tying goal. And so you create scenarios with a suggestion to the teams about the scoreline, the amount of players on the field, the amount of time left, and then see if you can train them in some of the responses to these things that will happen more naturally in the game environment. So, an example of situational play. And what we have here is, if I've got my little red dot, I have, okay, great. This was set up as a 6 versus 6 game. But now the coach has given the white team an additional player and taken that player from the red team. So now we have 7 in white, and we have the 5 in red, and the coach is now meeting with the white team. And what the coach is going to be discussing in this example, and of course you can think of 100 different variations, is, guys, you've got a player or 2 up, but you're losing this game. So we're going to play for 10 minutes, and your number's up, but you're losing the game. So how are you going to prepare to break down the reds? And then there's this huddle. And then, of course, the coach would go over to the red team and explain you're defending a lead, but your number's down, and then they would review their approach. Now, this slide in of itself isn't very exciting. Of course, in the manual, we'll have the notes for you. But the idea here is this private time for the coach to come up with a game tactic for the teams based on the situation that the coach has created. So in this case, the coach has created a numbers up, numbers down situation. He's created a time situation. They're going to play for maybe 10 minutes. And he's created a scoreline situation. And in this case, the Reds will be the team that are currently holding on to the lead. And so what does this look like? Well, here we see that the red team, because of their numerical disadvantage and they're holding on to a lead, has chosen to bunker in. So the 4 of them on the field and the goalkeeper, they're pretty deep and they're trying to stay compact. And of course the white team with a numerical advantage, but chasing the game, have tried to get their team through across the back, central player, very wide player, and then a guy running in here. They've tried to really spread the play. And so right away, the situation has been interpreted by the players, both the white team and the red team, and they're making some tactical adjustments based on the situation that the coach is presenting. Now, what is critical here, as we look at the third slide, is that in the case of the red team, the coach has suggested to them that it's not enough to just defend really deep, but once you've won it, can you have an outlet pass? Now, why is the outlet pass possible? Well, the white team, has been very spread out while they were attacking, so there is some space to play through. The white team has been very aggressively stepped up into the attack, and so there is space behind the red team behind the white team if the Reds can exploit it. And this, of course, is a much better option for the Reds than simply kicking the ball out of bounds. And in this case, they've actually managed to score a second goal, and off they go. So If you understand my explanation of situational play, a great opportunity for you to create scenarios in training that may occur in the game that you can rehearse and practice. And of course, you could do this numbers up, but you get to create scenarios, situations, and then you let the players interpret them. Okay. Paul Marco is one of our top presenters in our national schools on the topics of transition and on the topic of counterattack. So I'll show you a couple of ideas here, and Paul will go into them in a dedicated webinar. If you understand the idea of transition, or you hear about it, people will talk about transition as the third moment of the game. That's to say between having the ball and not having the ball, or sometimes they'll talk about the fourth moment. You have it, and then you lose it, or you didn't have it and you win it. So it's really just a personal preference. But when we talk about transition, if you hear third or fourth moment of the game, don't worry. Some people say 3, some people say 4. From my perspective, the key to transition, the fundamental keys to transition, is the technical speed of your team. If your team has good technique, then they should be able to get behind the ball and learn how to win the ball quickly. And if they have good technique, when they win it, they should be able to possess it or play longer passes or dribble at people with speed. If your team is technically limited, your effectiveness in transition will be heavily impaired, because you might not be able, once you've lost possession, to effectively win it back, or by the same token, when you've won it, you may not be able to effectively develop an attack because of technical limitation. And so key to transition, effective transition, is making sure you've got technically sound players. Beyond that, they need to be able to make good decisions. So based on their relative technical skill set, can they see the decisions that need to be made when their team has just won the ball or their team has just lost it? What is their response cognitively as much as their response physically? And then what is your team concept? The example here of David Silva, one of the few Spanish national team players that doesn't play for Real Madrid or Barcelona, but certainly the Spanish, feeding off of the energies of Barcelona, their team concept is when we lose the ball, we're going to try to win it back very quickly. And is that your team concept? Or is your team concept to be more like the Italian team, where you decide you're going to drop off and concede space and let the other team come on to you? So you're going to have your own approach to how you want to see your team transition offensively and defensively. And finally, and this is very critical for me, if your team defends with good shape, when you win the ball, you should be in good shape to then counterattack or attack from that. That's to say your left-sided players are on the left, your right-sided players are on the right, your strikers are high, your defenders are supporting with the midfield. If you defend or attack with a very eclectic system, and you've got a lot of movement and a lot of players changing out of position, are you as adept at transition when the time comes? Because you've got your players in different shape and different position, and maybe that doesn't suit your need to transition attacking or transition to defending. So I consider team shape very critical. So here's a quick activity, and one that I personally like, and is one that I recently put up on my Twitter account. So if you like looking for lesson plans, please use the NSCAA website, the NSCAA app, which is a free app, and you're welcome to follow me at Barker NSCAA, and I typically put up lesson plans like this for coaches to follow. And so the concept of this game is the white team is trying to get the ball from this target to this target down here, using the 4 white players in the middle of the grid. If the red team should win it, they're trying to go to the target player here or the target player here, and the server starts every activity with a ball to one of the outside guys. And so, as you can appreciate, right now the white team effectively has 6 players in play, and the red team only has 4 because the 2 red targets are not available to play. So the ball has come into the target, he or she has begun to play the ball out, and now the white team is looking to combine to get it down to this player here. And so a nice possession flow activity. Of course, if the Reds win it, their job, their mission is to go here or here, and the job of the Whites is to immediately defend that east-west, if you will, attacking option. And so I think you can see here this is a great possession activity, a 6v4 effectively, but clearly when the ball gets turned over, there's some very quick responses that potentially need to be made to the effect. And what we look at now is we develop this session, so we see the Reds attacking, and to create flow, and so to allow you as the coach to keep this game going, the red team has received the ball from the target, the server has played it to the red team. The Reds have built the passing sequence up and got it to their target. So they've played this pass, and then the target will run into the field of play with the ball, and the person that played the last pass goes to the outside. So now you have the transition of positions within the activity. The targets and the field players are actually physically transitioning through the space as well. And now you're able to keep this game going. You don't have to stop and change the target. You can let the game flow because the targets change as a consequence of success in the activity. And I really like this activity. You can play this for a long time with players and certainly emphasize transition, but you can emphasize any number of things. It could be a technical session of possession too. And then finally, another little wrinkle that we can play is that not only would you transition when you finally get it down to this target, but if we go forward, but we kind of stymie, so we go back, and we go back to the original target. We've used that original target as effectively a support player, but we're also going to exchange positions if we play back. And so now this support player can dribble in, and this player will come out, and so you can change the shape of the game that way too. So you can play with fixed targets, you can play exchange with the target you score with, and you can certainly play to exchange with the target that is the support target as opposed to the attacking target. So some great variations and opportunities. And then counterattack, which again, Paul Marco will dedicate an entire webinar to. So much more detail from Paul in this regard to enjoy, to look forward to. But the defensive mentality I alluded to, which is preeminent with the Spanish national team, Barcelona, and now you're going to start seeing more with Bayern Munich because of the influences of Pep Guardiola. But this notion of we've lost the ball, we want to get going with attack, so we're going to win it back really quickly. When we don't have the ball, how quickly can we win it back? Natural stoppages, throw-ins, goal kicks, free kicks are a great opportunity to exploit for the counterattack. So if you have a player that has a particularly long throw, if he or she can quickly recover the ball and throw it over the top of the opponent, you can get in offside, so the player off of the throw-in. So there's a great opportunity for a quick counterattack off a natural stoppage. Similarly, a quick free kick. So you don't pass for 10 yards, you don't look around to wait for the referee to do a number of different things. You just put your hand on the ball, get it restarted, off we go. The reason the counterattacks on national stoppages are so important is that very often it's a time when the opponent will take some downtime. They might wait to get reorganized or organized for defending a corner kick or defending a free kick, setting up a wall, and why not exploit that hesitancy or that delay with the opponent and get your team playing faster. Your ability to counterattack will obviously be based at times on the athletic ability of your team. If you have speed, athletic speed on your team, and you have athletic strength, that's to say your team can play longer passes accurately over distances because they're physically strong enough and they're technically able, you will be a more effective counterattack team. Speed is clearly part of the counterattack. Outlet options, the counterattack. Do you have targets that are high, central targets that are also mentally engaged because you've been defending, now you've won it, are they ready to be the counterattack option? Do you have players wide, so you've defended centrally, you've won it, now can you kick the ball out wide? Do you have wide players that will attack? So consider your outlet options after you've defended if you want to be an effective counterattack team. And then very critically, perhaps more at the higher levels of competition, if you've got more of a premier team, an elite team, high school, college, do you have that special player, the number 10 player in the modern parlance, that you can give the ball to that will be the person that begins your counterattacks? And so as a former central defender myself, when I won the ball, we didn't typically counterattack off of my penetrating pass. My job was to get the ball to arguably to a better player who could really set up our attack. So if you have that special player and your team understands and accepts that, he or she might be the quarterback of your counterattack. And so in this little activity, I like this one because we focus right now on the red team. So we're just going to work with the red team on the notion of counterattack. So the services for the Reds will always restart the activity from the two service players who are the blue. The white team will set up their beginning of possession from their goalkeeper. So what we've got here to start with is just a 4 versus 4 with goalkeepers, so 5 versus 5. The red team receives their ball from the server, and they immediately play out, and they catch the whites, and they just get a play down the wing, a service across, and a red runs in and they attack. And so we start off with just a simple 5 versus 5, and the ball starts with the blue. But as we see the session develop now, what we've done here as the red team is we've caught the whites very high on the team. So the whites have just had an attack, and in this case you see they've just scored. So this white player has just scored, but the blue team, the blue player immediately plays the ball in. So it's a very quick introduction of the ball, and we prep the reds to play out, play forward, and go straight to goal. So we've caught the white team having had a very mature attack, and they've managed to get a score or a shot on goal. But the red team gets this early service in, which allows them to begin the attack and counterattack very quickly. And a similar way of counterattacking. So in this previous example, the whites have been in advanced positions on the field, so now the reds have got behind them. When we look at this third example, what we've seen is the red team have pressed quite high. And so the white team have played out of the back from their goalkeeper, but they've been dispossessed in a very high position. And so now the reds counterattack, and they're not counterattacking in the space because there's not much space, but they're so close to goal, they're able to get a quick strike. So sometimes when we counterattack, we're counterattacking, in this case, from high on the field, and in other cases, in this previous example, we're counterattacking from deep and exploiting the space behind the opponent. So you have to think about where your counterattacks will come from based on where your team wins the ball or where the opponent turns it over. And the key to this one is using these servers in blue to make sure that the counterattacking options of the red happen very, very quickly. So the servers help you increase your speed of play for the red team. Okay, and so free kicks, dead balls, restarts. This will come from my colleague, Tony DeChico. And I'm going to repeat this slide a little bit later because these are key considerations for me. As a youth coach, training the free kick, dead ball, restarts, corner kicks can be quite challenging. How much time do you dedicate to this when your primary issue is developing your players technically and tactically at a young age and getting team shape and team movement down? It might be difficult to dedicate a lot of time to dead ball situations. So I would question how much time you spend. I would certainly say it's quite a low amount of time at the younger ages, and then that time increases as the team concept develops and the technical level of the players improves. How do you manage it in a training environment? Is it a very stop-start type of training environment when you do these specialty situations, or can you find a way to teach and develop these things in more of a flow environment? And that's what I hope to show you here in the next few minutes. A team culture and a common language. So I think it's critical that your team understands what are the basic principles of the dead balls that you want to, the way you want to play them. Do you want to strike a goal? Do you want to try to play short? Do you want to move the opponent around? Do you want to reintroduce the ball quickly? And sometimes there's just simple language. And one example is North Carolina women's team, maybe Jason will allude to it, actually have key words. So framing the goal to the North Carolina women's team means something very specific on dead balls. I won't give away their secrets right now, but they have some language which is unique to them about how their dead balls work. I'm a huge proponent of using left and right-footed players on dead ball situations to mess up the organization of the opponent and the opposing goalkeeper. Questions and considerations pertaining to defensive organization, man-to-man or zone. And then on dead ball situations, what are your attacking imperatives? Is it always to get a strike on goal? Is it to get a lot of numbers forward? Is it to have very peculiar setup pattern plays? Or is it a little bit more hit and miss? What is your attacking philosophy as a group as it pertains to dead balls? So here's a great way just to practice free kicks without having to really disrupt the flow of an activity unnecessarily. So in this case, just a regular small-sided scrimmage. I think we've got 6v6 here, and simply put, the goalkeeper, the coach, at any period of time, for any reason, just says, "Hey, free kick." He indicates where the free kick's going to be, and then the players adjust and react to that free kick. And he's going to be doing this for the purposes of either defensive organization or offensive organization. The coach is probably not going to try to achieve both of those in this session. But simply put, the coach decides when the kids are playing just to introduce the free kick, so we make sure we've got a few to work on. Here we see the free kick now set up. The red team over the ball. They've got two players over the ball. Hopefully, for me, one is left and right. One is right-footed. There's a red player in the wall, and there's red players hanging out. The white team has set up a wall, and then they've got some defenders. So now the coach is taking a few minutes to rehearse some of this before the players take the free kick. And in this case, the attacking free kick is played with a in-swinging right-footed pass, a right-footed shot to the far post. It's come around the wall, so maybe this player is a good screen player. And one of the important things about this free kick is that because the player has played it to the, what I could say, the big side of the goal, as opposed to the narrow side, the ball potentially stays in play. So if it hits a defender, maybe this player can run in, or this player can run in and get some rebounds. So I tend to like to see going to the far side. There is more time for the ball to travel, but the ball stays in play potentially longer. Was the wall adequately set up? Is the goalkeeper in the right position? If you're looking at defensive organization, those would be your considerations. And then, of course, here, and this will be in the annotated version of this, what is the technical requirements of striking this ball to keep it low, to keep it high, to bend it? So this might be more of a technical session as opposed to a strictly tactical session. Now this slide, before we get into corners, is simply a repeat for you of my key consideration. How much time do you spend? How does it affect the training environment in terms of flow? Does your team understand the common language, culture, and also those attacking imperatives? Do they understand your defensive organization principles? And for me, critically, left and right footed, because that's going to have an impact on corner kicks for their in-swinging or their out-swinging. So again, these are my key considerations. And the way we work corner kicks in is, again, without being very disruptive and having a lot of start-start, we just play a small-sided game. And so to begin with, we play with very small numbers, because as we defend this corner kick, we're working on one guy on the post, one guy on the post, and one player cutting off balls driven across the penalty area, and then one free player to kind of pick up markers. Now, in this scenario, I would argue to you that this player and this player are zoning because they're marking the post. They're zoning these areas. This player is zoning the front of the penalty box. This player is the freelance player. So this is an example of a blended man-to-man and zone defense on a small corner kick. Once the corner kick is played, whatever the outcome is, if the ball is still in play, we certainly want to make sure that the game continues off of it. So if the Reds were successful in defending it and they can counterattack, let's play that through. So don't keep stopping the activity. Let the players play out as the game flows. And the red team, in the case of the previous example, has managed to win a corner kick because every out of bounds will restart with a corner kick. We don't need throw-ins in this activity, we want corner kick. And so I would be consistent. I would say to my white team, I want you to defend posts, front of the penalty box or the 6-yard, and then this freelance player. And so now we're starting to establish with this entire group of red and white players some consistency in our approach to defending these corners. By the same token, we could flip it and make it attacking movement. But I think you can see here, we can obviously really expand the numbers over time, but we're allowing the players to get some basics down about our defensive organization or potentially our offensive organization by playing a small-sided game, but with every out of bounds being rewarded with a corner kick, so we get lots of repetition to rehearse our corner kicks, and we allow our training session to have more of a natural feel than a lot of stop-start where we're working down at one goal and there's a lot of players not engaged in the activity. And so my final thought slide here, and obviously you can read this for yourself, but this is the key for me, the highlighted section in blue. You as the youth coach need to be very concerned about ensuring that you are making sure your players are proficient in the technique and tactics required for the level you're playing at. And so these key moments, I think, are these fantastic intangibles, or in the case of dead balls, perhaps slightly more tangible, but these key issues that can differentiate two teams of equal ability and make one of them more successful in the accumulation of wins and losses. So I do think key moments is critical. However, if you as a youth coach spend an inordinate amount of time on the key moments, be it managing substitutions, be it dead balls, and your players are not continually developing their proficiency in technical and tactical areas, then you've gone too far to the key moments. And so I do encourage you to be very mindful of having proficient players across the board and then developing your understanding of the key moments and preparing your team to make those adjustments in the competitive environment. And if you go right to the beginning of my presentation when I talked about situational play, that's a wonderful example of a way of creating these preparation opportunities. So I kind of spent through a lot of material there. These, again, is a very general overview for you. But I really encourage you to listen to Jason, Paul, and Tony for a much greater understanding of the specifics of each one of the topics I covered in a thumbnail. And right now I'm going to turn it back over to David, and we'll take a couple of questions.
Thanks, Ian. Just to remind you, if you are new to the series, you can receive 4 complimentary copies of Soccer Coach Weekly for you and all the coaches in your club. Those are the images that we've used in this presentation. So if you like those, that comes out on a weekly basis, and I will include a link to how you can get that information and get that set up for your coaches over the course of the next 24 hours. If you are interested in participating as a club in the series, as many of these clubs have done so, you can certainly follow up and we'll get you set up as a club, and there is discount pricing for that. And it's a great way to supplement your in-house coaching education program. Just a reminder that in order to benefit from and participate in the subsequent webinars, the next 4, you must register by 3 p.m. Eastern today, which gives you approximately about an hour and a half to take advantage and register for the rest of the series. One of the things we thought we might share with you at this point is what's coming up. There isn't anything up on the website yet, but over the course of the next 6 to 12 months, we're going to offer a number of different events, more special topics diplomas that will also convert to on-demand, meaning that you can then go back and join those at any point. And we're going to look at 2 new series, the Champions League and the World Cup series over the course of the next 2 to 3 months that will look specifically at different ways that these teams are playing, and then activities that you can introduce to your teams if you'd like your team to play more like a Barcelona, Bayern Munich, or Chelsea, and similarly with the national teams. Some of the coaching courses, the Level 1 Diploma for field players and Level 1 Diploma for goalkeeping, we're looking at converting those into courses, and then run some pre-course materials for people considering the national, advanced national courses. and then eventually to the events, and we have a number of things coming up like the Summer Symposium in July and August in Orlando, and we'll be running a pre-event preview to that series there when we'll be focusing very much on attacking and defending principles as the main theme. So let's go to some questions now. Ian, let's start off with one that was sent in by Brian, and he asks, what should be the strategy for taking effective corners with players that don't have the strength to serve the ball all the way to the goal?
Thank you for that question, and it's a wonderful question because I think this really speaks to some of the challenges we have as youth coaches when the kids are being asked to play on big fields or with big numbers on the field, which necessitates a bigger field, and they are not technically or physically ready. So when we talk about developmental appropriateness, if we've got a level of play and a size of field and athletes and the kids can't effectively kick the ball into the penalty area, what a nonsense, really. So I would certainly work on short corner kicks or certainly see what the relative range of your players is, and if they can maybe get it to the front of the six at least, maybe and they can get it in the air, you can position a player there who can then flick the ball on. But I would certainly get perhaps one and ultimately two players over in support of the corner kick, and hopefully corner kick takers can potentially collect a pass on the short pass and then develop and build from there. I would make sure to take advantage of the distance away from the corner kick the opponents must be. So hopefully you'd get about 10 yards of playing space and your kids can play at least a short corner. It might be, however, that a corner kick ends up being to the negative for you because it just gives the opponent an opportunity to counterattack because you're probably going to turn the ball over. If that's the case, be mindful that you might need to keep a couple of defenders back because you struggle to retain possession when you have a corner kick. But I would certainly, instead of just having the kids welly it and toe bash it into the box and see how strong they can be, see if you can develop perhaps an opportunity to possess from a corner kick.
If you are thinking of a question, please send it in now. We'll take 2 or 3 more, and then we'll prepare for this evening's session. This is from John. He refers to defending corner kicks and asks, what coaching points would you give younger players, the U11, U14 age groups, to mark players? Are they supposed to be watching the path of the ball, or how do you coach them to avoid scoring an own goal?
Yeah, it's a good question. If the ball is served in such a way that your defenders have to turn and recover back towards their goal, they're facing the wrong way and they're going to concede goals because they're going to be running towards their own goal. A la John Terry to some extent this weekend in the Premier League. So from my perspective, and this is fundamental at the professional level down to the youth level, is a stance, an open stance where you can see the ball and you can see your opponent. So there are very few times when you defend a corner kick where your feet are such that you are squared up to the end of the field or perpendicular to the end of the field, and you have this 45-degree stance. And so you can see the ball and you can see the opponent. The key in any defending man-to-man is to not let the opponent get across you. And so if you allow the movement of the opponent and that opponent can get in front of you, typically the opponent gets to the ball first and then they're flicking stuff on. By the same token, if you get too transfixed on the ball and defending the space in front of you, then you may lose sight of the opponent behind you. But the general rule of thumb is a 45-degree stance to the ball that allows you to see both the ball and your opponent pretty much all the time.
Mark asked a question, at what age does situational play become an important and effective training tool?
That's a really good question, one I think we had last Tuesday, and I would argue situational play can be put in with the youngest of ages. Now, you might not choose to make a big deal about it, but you could play with under 8s and play with 1 extra player and or 2 extra players and just encourage the kids to think about what it means and just ask them what it means. Okay, you've got 2 less guys, that doesn't seem very fair. but what are you going to do? How are you going to solve this problem? So hopefully there's not a lot of sendings off in the under 8 level. Or you could simply just say to a group of the under 8s, we're going to play with a different scoreline. You're not going to get overly sophisticated understanding or responses, or particularly logical responses in terms of the manner of play, but why not get them thinking about it? I would argue by the time we're 11, 12, 13, we need to critically understand moments of the game and what that tells us about how our style of play or our manner of play needs to potentially adjust. So when we kick off the game at 0-0, equal numbers, everything is equal, we're going to try to play the way that we prepared all week. As the situations change, we need to change too. And so I think we should be making this a focus, certainly by the time we're in the U11, U12.
Okay, and last question. Nathan asked if you can expand upon the use of the number 10 in counterattacks.
Yeah, okay, Nathan. Well, forgive me just for a second, because I'm going to lapse into perhaps some examples that might not be resonate with all the audience. But there's an argument in the modern game right now that the player that typically plays very deep in the midfield and breaks up the play, now that player not only has to be a good defender, but also that's where your number 10 plays. Your number 10 actually plays a lot deeper now in the modern game than previously, where they were more of a support in the attack. And the idea is that because teams are able to transition quickly between offense and defense, defense and offense, is if you don't get the ball to your number 10 player, your quarterback, if you will, or the guy that predicates your attacks quickly, then you lose the opportunity for effective counterattack. Now, at the youth levels, you're probably not going to have that special player that can play a long range of passes, or can see the connecting pass, or can break people down with the dribble as a key focus. But certainly, as we get into the competitive premier, travel, I'm thinking 13s, 14s, high school, at college, you may have those special players. And you need to make sure that to be an effective counterattack team, the ball needs to go through that player quickly and effectively. Where you choose to position them and how you choose to get it to them will depend on your team. So it may be they're going to be very close to the top of your box to pick up the pass to play out, or it may be you can afford to have them very high on the field because your team can physically find them. But the key is that there are going to ultimately, as we develop our youth teams, there are going to be certain players that Coach Jerry Yeager at Indiana would have called piano carriers, and there will be just one or two that are piano players, and you want to get the ball to your piano players, and that's the job of the piano carriers to get them the ball.